And on we go with Bronislav's, one of my parishioners, by the way, the beloved topic of the canons of the church. He always smiles so sweetly when I bring out this topic. Never mind, we'll only be another 3 or 4 months before we go on to something else. Right. So, Canon 21 of the Sixth Ecumenical Council is just one where if a bishop or presbyter or reader has been defrocked, if he voluntarily gives up the crime for which he's been defrocked, he is allowed, and it seems to be a positive thing, to continue to have the tonsure that he has as a clergy, can wear it and sort of still dress as a clergyman, even though he can't function as such. If he fails to give up the crime, he's just got to look like a layman. So it's considered an honour to have a clergy. And the clergy in those times was a tonsure on the top of your head, where you have a patch on there. Modern priests tend to wear their hair long, but the proper is you have a shaved patch on the top of your head. That is a proper tonsure, which all clergy from readers upwards are supposed to have. It's set apart from God. So this canon is just simply saying if he repents voluntarily, he can continue to wear the tonsure and look like a clergy even if he's deposed. If not, he's just got to look completely like a layman and grow his hair back into the normal form. So the idea of long hair for clergy is quite modern, actually. And it sort of comes from monastic things. But originally, we have a tonsure, shorter hair of a tonsure on top. Right. 22. We command that those men who've been deposed from office, whether they're bishops or clergymen, if you're ordained for money, you're not allowed to be paying money. That's Simon Magnuson do this. So it's got to be as with a test and a choice of life. It's got to be someone who's suitable for the job and is well tested, isn't ever for money. And they should be deposed that way. Right. No one, whether a bishop, presbyter, deacon, that imparts communion shall collect from the partaker coins or any compensation whatsoever in exchange of such communion. I'm not allowed to go and get money for communing somebody. Now, that's as if I'm being paid for it. The gift is a free gift. That's distinct from people giving to the church so that the priest can survive. If you want to give a gift to a priest who comes along, then that's okay, it's acceptable. But the priest should never be asking money and paying it as a fee. Unfortunately, sometimes in our churches, we almost have fees for getting married, fees for baptism. This is not good. Really, you should be just given tradition that all the mysteries of the church, the baptism, should be free of charge. And if you want to give a donation to it. But that assumes that you're a member of the church that's coming along and giving to support the priest in any case regularly. And so this idea now, sort of people come and get married in church who don't actually attend the church as regular participants. I think there is some reason to say, well, if they're not actually coming to church and not paying to support the priest in his life, and by giving a sort of a tithe or an offering or something, then maybe they should be paying for their marriage. But then again, why are we giving them the mysteries of the church, which belong to the members of the church, if they're not really coming to church? It's not just a ceremony for sheer show of it. And so things are becoming quite bad in this sense. So the church should be a little bit more careful. Unfortunately, it's fallen down. Oh, you just turn up to church and pay your money to get your nice ceremony done. That's not a good way of doing it. It should be part of your community of being a Christian, that you get married and you get that properly solemnized in the community as part of the community for the love of God, not for a nice ceremony. But anyway, we are not to be selling the gifts for money. That is quite wrong. If you're demanding compensation of any kind, it would be therefore deposed from office. Right. Those in the sacerdotal list, readers, chanters, subdeacons, deacons, presbyters and bishops, or monks, and I assume when it says monks it includes nuns, we're not allowed to go to horse races or become involved in pastimes. So monks, we shouldn't be sort of doing things which are just sort of idly spending time, like playing backgammon or going off to play bridge or something like this, or especially if it involves gambling and that type of thing, we should be staying away from that. But yeah, we're not really supposed to go to races. Go. No, we have to be living at a certain different level from this type of life. And if any clergyman should be invited to a wedding, whenever fraudulent games are introduced, let him rise up and protest. So if you go to a wedding, for example, and someone would say, "Oh, let's play a bit of cards for a little bit of money here," oh no, and protest and walk out. Or you could even be very strict on this. Let's play some trivia. Oh yes, okay. No, you're playing trivia now. This is a pastime, so I'll work out. I don't know how strict we can make this, but certainly if anything to do with money or gambling. But yes, we've got to be careful, even just sort of pastimes, we need to be a little bit careful of this. So there we go. There's a high expectation for the priest. So try not to invite your priest friends out to the races or other pastime events. It may not be very good for him. Right. Right. In addition, just the new canon prescribes that rural district parishes belonging to each church are to remain with the bishops. So when you have a bishop's probably in a city, and then he has a whole lot of countryside around the city, and then he has parishes in the countryside. Of course, whether this parish on the edge of his territory belongs to this city or that city can be a little bit open to dispute. And sometimes it may be with this city, but the other bishop can get there closer and starts to help out. The church has decided that the parishes should remain with the city where they've originally positioned with altogether. And you're not allowed to swap them back and forth. So if that little country parish, like our one, we belong to our city, although we don't have cities anymore, we've got these floating bishops, so I don't know how that works. But anyway, that's what that canon is about. But there is a consistency, that the church order structure has a permanence to it. And we stick to the same place, the diocese stays the same, the metropolitan stays the same. It shouldn't be changing and varying and stuff like that. The church structure is actually grounded and stable. And that's quite important for proper accountability and things like that. So that's what Canon 25 is about. Canon 26, if a presbyter has unwittingly entangled himself in an unlawful marriage, let him retain his rights to sitting in his rank in accordance with that which is prescribed as legislation by the sacred canon, but let him refrain from the rest of the functions and activities. So again, we've seen another case where sometimes if he's got married to someone who's had a widow, for example, which is an illegal marriage, he can, and they find out later, he can still retain the honour of a presbyter, and he can go and sit with the presbyters and stuff, but he's not allowed to go to serve a liturgy or do anything of himself, but he can still sort of be with the presbyters and be called such, but he's not allowed to function. So there's a case where you're allowed to keep the look and your position, but lose the function. For him to bless another, so if he messes up. Let him therefore bless no one, either publicly or privately, nor distribute the body of Christ to anyone or perform any other liturgical office. On the contrary, while consenting himself with the presidency, let him persistently weep to others and to the Lord to be part of the iniquitous deed which he has unwittingly perpetuated. And it is obvious that any such unlawful marriage must be dissolved, and the man will have no essential share in the sacred office of which he has been deprived. He also must get rid of the marriage as well. And you can see actually that there is no niceties about marriage that if you're caught up in an illicit marriage, you have to break it and cease from it. There's no like, oh, she's going to feel upset or about emotional ties and stuff. None of this. If it's right or it's wrong. If it's right, go on. If it's wrong, stop. So yeah, it's as, and they're not even asking about little children and stuff, part of it. So of course, we've always economy in these things, and we must be careful not to push the obedience, as it said in another canon, to austerity. But nevertheless, we need to obey the traditions of the church. No one in the clerical list don inappropriate clothing, either when living in a city or when walking on the road. But on the contrary, let him wear costumes that have already been assigned to those who are enrolled for clergy. Right. So, Canon 27 is when you're on a clerical list, from reader, chanters, stuff, you are to wear clerical clothing, the clothing appointed to the clergy, which is the standard sort of a cassock in modern times. And you should wear that whether you're going walking on the road, living in the city. You should be wearing it basically every time you're out in public. Nowadays, the readers almost not expected to be wearing anything, even when they walk into the church, except when they're serving. But properly, they should be in cassocks normally. And associate presbyters and deacons, they shouldn't be seen in sort of lay clothes walking around in the city or things like that. They should be wearing their cassocks or some other form of clerical clothing. Of course, we've got to take, in the West, you need to take a little bit of economy in this and work with modern expectations. But it's good to know the canon that is there. And the clerical clothing belongs from the reader upwards. It is not from the presbyters or the deacons. It's the readers upwards. They are clergy. And it says anyone on the clerical list. They're on the clerical list. So the tonsure for the head, where that is given as a reader. Not when you become a deacon, not when you become a presbyter, or the long hair, whatever. It comes when you're a reader. And so does the clothing. All the other ways of looking like a clergy belong from the reader upwards. In modern times, we've sort of forgotten a lot about the positions of readers and stuff, and just almost like treat them as laymen, and they just put on the black robe as they're singing, or a sclerion, or the old traditions and the Phalonian, the chasuble. And they just walk around in laymen otherwise. But no, they should actually be dressed with a clerical tonsure and a clerical clothing. And so, but presbyters, we shouldn't be walking around in suit and tie during that. But again, all things in the economy as necessity, but this is a canon that actually says we should be wearing our proper costume around and about. And not just at church. We have learned that the various churches where grapes are offered on the sacrificial altar in accordance with a certain custom, they're just basically saying, look, we just offer the bread and the wine on the altar. We don't put anything else. But you can put up and bless some grapes. But we don't sort of offer them in a sort of sacrificial sense on there. So that's that one. 29, the canons of fathers made at Carthage prescribed that the holy rites must be performed in order of men under fast. Right, so this one, whenever I am serving the liturgy, if I was a married priest, I shouldn't be sleeping with my wife the night before the morning thereof. I'm fasting, that thing. Obviously, I don't eat anything from midnight onwards before I serve, nor do the lay people when they come to communion. But they were saying here that the church doesn't command the priest to be abstaining from their wives from the moment of marriage all the time. They can sleep with their wives when they're not serving the next day, sort of thing, or it's not a fast time, etc., respecting the fast. But they're not obliged to be refraining from their wives, other than when they're serving. So that's what that one. In the West, they got very, very strict. So anything else in this canon we decree? Yeah, no, that's basically it. That's 29. 30. Wishing to do everything for edification church, we decide to make concessions to priests in barbarian churches. So that if they are seeking to circumvent the Apostolic Canon 5 by not expelling their wife by not expelling on the account of reverence, and do this beyond the limits set by it, coming to private agreement with their spouses to abstain from intercourse. Right, they say basically the barbarians in the West were trying to say, "I'll be brother-sister relationship with their wife. We'll stop having intercourse, but or I'll keep you in that married." And they said, "No. Either you have a proper marital relations, or cut your wife out altogether, throw her away, and have nothing to do with her. Don't go beyond nature and have this brother-sister relationships, even if it's mutual agreement." They are saying, look, it's not good to be doing that. Now, it doesn't mean occasionally a husband and wife shouldn't be moving towards that type of thing as they get older. And some very pious couples can manage it, but it's not really sort of encouraged or bound to them, because it's such a difficult and dangerous thing to be doing. It's much better if the husband and wife be engaged in normal marital relations than trying to keep some sort of this sort of piety. And if you are, you're better off actually going off to monasteries with each other. So just a warning against that. So they're just saying, look, if you're going to do that, then just separate from each other. Yes, it's interesting. We make this concession to them, not for any other reason, but because of a pusillanimity of, I can't pronounce it very well, of their thought, the bizarre character of their ideas of morality, and unsettled state of their mind. So in other words, they were criticizing the priests who say, well, I'm a priest now, I can't sleep with my wife, and saying, no, this is not good morality. No, you're blessed, it's good to do that, and this is a strange mind. So yeah, we've got to be careful if we're going down that. Some of these, what seem to be pious, we've got to be careful. Maybe we're actually we're getting over the top and we're thinking of something strange. So quite often, actually, let's just do the normal thing and not try to be too excessive in our piety. Now, that's not to say that there are certain times we shouldn't be doing something pious, but generally in the marriage relationship, just live with your husband and wife normally. Don't try to do anything extra pious about it. Enjoy the relationship as it is given in a normal way. Don't try to make it extra super holy, at least not until you're older. And if you're wanting to later, you're actually better off to divorce, separate, and go off to monasteries if you want to be super pious and stuff. Actually move away rather than sort of have a sort of thing, sort of brother sister relation. Not to say that's absolutely wrong, but yeah, we've just got to be a little careful in how we implement that. All right. For those clergymen who hold a liturgy, oratories in oratories or prayer houses or in private residences who carried out baptism, they are to be without the consent of the local bishop. So excuse me sometimes when I read a little bit quickly and I don't quite read it right. This is that we're not allowed to hold liturgies in private houses, in private spaces, or in my little chapel, etc., unless the bishop has given consent, or there is great necessity in times of persecution, or there's some reason of necessity. But otherwise, we need to do it in a public space. So, as I said, there are times of great necessity where you even can't get in touch with a bishop, or you ask the bishop for permission to do this, and he can give that permission. But generally, we are to do public services for all the people in the public spaces. Mm-hmm. Canon 32 is quite long, but quickly, the Armenians were offering the gifts of wine alone. And when we offer the gifts, we actually have wine mixed with water, because the water and blood come out of the side of Christ. And the Armenians were just offering wine. So it's actually wrong if we're not allowed to offer without mixing water and wine together. So this is basically condemning that practice. Poor old Armenians started to do all sorts of weird things by the 7th century, like they were using unleavened bread, they were using wine without water, their clergy, the readers were not properly tonsured, and just or blessed. They actually were wearing a tonsure, but they weren't canonically blessed by a bishop, etc. And so we're getting quite a lot of canons here going, the Armenians are doing this, the Armenians are doing that. Yes, and you're not allowed to offer water by itself. Is a wicked it's actually in the heresy if you say, I just offer water or just offer wine by itself. You must put the two together. And it's fussy that the church is careful when we offer bread. It matters it's leavened bread. It matters as it's wine and the symbols must be correctly produced and the right sort of wine in there. I can't offer just simple grape juice or Coca-Cola or tea on there. I must offer wine and red wine for that matter on there, and it must be mingled with water. So, and we must use leavened bread. If we don't use leavened bread, unleavened bread it's not the same. The mystery is not conveyed. So the symbols aren't just totally abstract. They need to have because it's physical. It has to have a real form, a real substance. It has to meet certain criteria of that form to represent the trueness of the physicality of it. It's not just sort of an abstract. It's all about the symbol and the spiritual thing, and the physical doesn't matter. It's just any sort of symbol will matter. No, the actual physical thing has to be right to become what it is meant to be spiritually. Right. So that is that canon 32, 33. Oh yes, again. This is one I just mentioned before. We have learned in the fact that the country of Armenians, only those are of hierarchical priestly lineage are eligible to the clergy. So this is like the Jewish thing. You have to be from the same family, a clerical family, to you can be a clergy. And this was actually happening in Russia in the 19th century. They basically had priestly families. Priests were the father was a priest, the father was a priest. Not quite where it was a rule, but it was becoming like this, and this was condemned. This is like Jewish customs, but no, you must take clergy who are worthy from all things, not just because they're from a priestly family. It's whoever's worthy from it, whether a priestly family or not, and to do that. If they may be in a priestly, but are worthy, they don't become a priest. They might be in the butcher's family, and then the person becomes worthy to be a priest. Let them be ordained as a priest. But it's on the quality of character, not by their lineage. So this is what is just condemning that practice. And whether they are worthy of definitions. Furthermore, shall they permit, this is quite important, this one, anyone to speak from the pulpit to the laity of the divine words, in other words, reading the scriptures or singing the psalms, because these are all divine words, in accordance with the order of the enrollment of a clergy, unless the person has somewhat to show in the way of a priestly tonsure and a blessing canonically from the proper pastor, from the bishop. If anyone caught acting contrary to this rules prescribed, they're to be excommunicated. So we're not allowed to let lay people go and sing, read the apostle, chanting psalms to the people. It's got to be an ordained chanter or ordained reader who does these things. So lay people are not permitted to just go up and start singing and reading for the scriptures. You must be enrolled in the clergy. So that's why we are strict about who sings and chants, because this is what is the canon has been put into place. Yes, and some of them do not even tonsure their psalts and anagonostes to chanters and readers when install them in the holy temple, so they don't even tonsure them. For some reason, in modern times, they are not tonsuring our chanters either in the ordination process. I don't know why they're forgetting to do this. They give them the prayer and the blessing, and they forget to cut their hair. I don't know why they're following. The Russians are good at this, but sometimes the Greeks and the Antiochians have not been very careful in these things. Where I get confused, I don't know. But the canon's clear. But this is a big one. In modern times, anybody can sing and join in, but no, you can't. When it comes to the divine words, which is like the Psalms and the Canticles and the things, scriptural texts and the epistles, etc., they must be done by an ordained because, as I've said before, these are prophetic words, divine words. You need the grace of the Holy Spirit on you to speak them prophetically. And when you speak them as a reader, they are spoken with the grace of the Holy Spirit, which means the words come with the Spirit and they form Christ in the hearer. And they're spiritually livened in the mind. If a lay person is reading it, you just get words, empty words, no grace, no Spirit with them, and they don't have the same effect of begetting Christ in the mind of the hearers. There's some effect for hearing the word, but the grace is not there. And so it is important that we do this. In 34, it's a crime of conspiracy or factions utterly forbidden in the civil laws, much more fitting it is prohibited from the church. We're not allowed to sort of get together and go, oh, I want to take down the priest and stuff. Let's have a little thing and get him. That is, how can we take him out? You know, we don't like him anymore. Let's go for him. Oh, the bishop, I don't like him. Let's see a little group and oh yes, if we say this and this, we'll get him deposed or something like that. No. Let us stay away from any of this sort of thing. If a guy is sitting badly and it's obvious to everybody, okay, complain and get them there, but don't put little factions and groups and try to, I don't like him, I don't want him, and this is not the Christian spirit. We are one body, as I said in the sermon, we're everyone one, so let us keep away from this sort of, hatching plots against the bishop or fellow clergymen. This is not good. None of all metropolitans, when a bishop dies. Okay, so this is about the metropolitans. So this is not simply a bishop. These are the ones metropolitans are the ones in the charge of synods who ordain the bishops. He's not allowed to let a bishop dies and just, I'll forget him and leave the diocese without a bishop for ages. No, he's got to make sure that he promptly ordains a new bishop for that place. And properly, a bishop should be ordained from the clergy of the place of his diocese. You should always take in a presbyter of the diocese, which is a clergy, to be the new bishop. In Rome, it's like somebody with an archdeacon or something, but one of the clergy of the diocese should become the bishop. You don't bring bishops from elsewhere and bring them across. That's not right. You don't transfer bishops around from place to place. No. The new bishop is one of the clergy. And even in places like Constantinople, it's one of the clergy of Constantinople, one of the archimandrites or the presbyters. They become the bishop, not some bishop from another diocese transferred up. It's not like a game of going up orders of things with the presbyter. When you're a bishop, you stay in your diocese and that's it for life. You stay there. Then the clergy is put into that place. So it's not this game of I'm going up higher ranks of bishops and stuff, which is so common now. But this is not right. The local, and it's good that the local clergy takes over because they know the way of the churches and stuff, and they're following on. And it stops some of us messing around with political games of bishops, etc. Unfortunately, everywhere's got this problem. But yeah, that's a side thing on that. But definitely, and have any right, and the metropolitan's not allowed to take any money or stuff from the other bishop and stuff like that, but for his, but make sure everything's kept safe for the church. So there's always temptations, even from our bishops, we get tempted. Renewing the laws made of 150 fathers who assembled in this God-protected city. This is Canon 36. Yes. This one is another quite important one. Constantinople is to have equal seniorities as the throne of older Rome. And ecclesiastical mass should be magnified as the latter, but coming second after her. And after then the throne of Alexandrians come next, and Antioch, and then the throne of the city of Jerusalem. This is the so-called pentarchy. We see here. Now, this order cannot actually change. It's fixed. Confirming this is this order. The order of the churches doesn't get swapped around because they become more population, less population. City is bigger, city is smaller. No, we don't think like this. If you think like this, is not orthodox. The situation changes. Now, Constantinople is equal to Rome. It's considered to be magnified with her in all things. When it says second afterwards, we must first understand that they're equal. Then, because there's two that are equal, to stop them sort of rupturing, unfortunately they did rupture into two things. The Constantinople is second to their one for unity. And because Rome is still like the model of the first see, the universal see, which is sort of centre of unity. And in Constantinople is second to that. But in all powers, all authorities, it's the same. And where does that matter? Now the two churches are split. All the authority which Rome had over all the churches continues in Constantinople. It has all the authority of the first millennium that Rome had is in Constantinople, which is why Constantinople has such an influence on all the Eastern churches. Everyone follows her liturgy. Everyone follows her way. So she was very important. It's not just a matter of honor. There was a real precedence of the See of Constantinople. We should remember that. And then Alexandria stays second to that. Antioch, we don't swap around and say Antioch now. We don't take Moscow. Now it should be on top because it's got more people. No, we keep the order of that. And then in Jerusalem, even though it's a tiny little patriarchate, really, it still keeps its honor. And you'll see that in our diptychs. We do that. But you'll see some people arguing, oh, that should go. We should forget the seas now. No, this is not the ways here. But Constantinople does have all the thing of Rome. Doesn't mean it controls everybody. But it does have a lot of honor, and I won't go into all the details what that might mean. But that's a canon just reinforcing that. Right, Canon 37. Right, there's been at various times have been inroads of barbarians in cities where left result subject to iniquitous. So the president of such a city has been able to, after ordination, take possession of his own throne. So sometimes the bishop's not able, he's been ordained, but he can't actually go to the city because he's going to get killed or going to be murdered by barbarians, etc. So this is just a canon addressing that and how to work that out and make it effective. Okay, so just helping with that situation. Canon 38, we too retain the canon which is laid down by fathers and reads as follows: if any city has been rebuilt by imperial authority or has been built anew again, pursuant to civil or public formalities, let the order of ecclesiastical parishes be followed. Now, this is quite important. Some people will say that Constantinople was there because of political reasons, because of the empire, that just simply, when the empire is here, Constantinople is top. When the empire goes, Constantinople loses its position. This is not correct. The church is quite clear that while the order of cities of the church is based on the imperial order of cities. Rome was first, Alexandria was second, and Antioch was third. Later, when Constantinople was new Rome, is equal to Rome, as the same city as Rome, as capital, it gets it. Otherwise, if the political system changes, like a new city is made bigger or something like that, or your city becomes smaller, the order of churches stays the same. Even though Antioch now is like a village in Turkey, it remains its order relative to all the other sees. Even though he lives in Damascus, he's still the Patriarch Antioch. He's not suddenly the Patriarch Damascus is equal to the Antioch or whatever. He lives in Damascus, but even in Antioch, as I say, it's a small town now, that retains its ecclesiastical privilege. So we don't swap these things around. So though it's based on the political system, it doesn't follow the political system thereafter. It becomes part of the tradition of the church, and we don't change things. So that's what that one of those canon is saying. Right, and I think for today this will be the last one. Seeing out our brother and fellow minister John, the president of the Church of Cyprians. Right, what happened is Cyprus got invaded by Muslims, etc., and they actually said the synod could take a little area inside the main part of the country, just in Apulius, and live there for a little while, so they could continue sort of in exile from Cyprus. So they gave them a little space to do that, so they keep their structure and order. But since then, that's canon. Obviously, they've gone back to return to Cyprus, and the church is now re-established in Cyprus. So this canon has sort of become defunct. But it was an interesting canon that just sort of allowed the church, due to the invasions of the Muslims, to continue in its structure somewhere until it had a time to get back to its original location, which it has now. But still, that city has still sort of a place of honour and remembrance from this canon. But that's what that one was there. So there is allowed for some economy to keep the synod going, but generally everything stays the same as it was. And I think we will stop there for today. Any questions? Right. Have a good week ahead, and God willing, we'll see you in the new year. We have a nice exciting round of canons.